Jack, you muted.
Great start, everybody. I was muted on the stream, too. I have it synced up. Welcome to my muted talking head. Welcome back to the Fiction Game, a variety tabletop role-playing game stream live on Twitch, uploaded to YouTube, watched by few, loved by all. I'm Jack. I'm your host and narrator today, just like every week. And with me today are Hayden playing the role of Alberth,
Woo.
Sam playing the role of Merigold McCarlin, and Miles playing the role of Keath Dwarven Forged. We're back after another week. Excited to start a new chapter. If you missed us last week, we're 2 weeks into this campaign that's only going to last 4 or 5 weeks, so we're a good chunk of the way in. We've created characters, we've begun the story, and last we left off, our heroes were in the marquee fiefdom of Redreach, or the Redreach. On the border of two kingdoms, our heroes were approached by Vizier Kama, the left hand of the queen, who was gathering casters, powerful magic users, to protect her and her companions from would-be assassins who are trying to prevent them from returning an invaluable herb to the capital, where the queen awaits them. She needs that herb. There's a planned assassination, and our heroes are here to stop it, to protect Vizier Kama, to lead the caravan. And in our world, it has in fact been a week or so since we last checked in, and having traveled far from the Redreach, we see our heroes now on the outskirts of Earnhold, the capital of the Undery fiefdom, a petty barony that encompasses just one small canyon and a small area of unfruitful plains. It's a really pitiful little zone, and Merigold, being very acquainted with and accustomed to the workings of nobility, recognizes this place for what it is: a petty barony. Which is a small area of land given to someone who has technically earned a higher noble title than just lord, someone who has earned the ability to, be a major noble house, more than just the leader of their own household or a small estate. They need to have a fiefdom for whatever political reality has occurred. But in reality, the crown, the throne, the person who sits on it, doesn't like them very much. So they give them what's known as a petty barony, or pity barony, often also referred to as a sort of political favor, but really a token favor. Not much smaller than just a small estate or a minor fief. This petty barony of Undery is likely more of a statement against its owner than in favor of its owner from the crown. A sort of backhanded compliment of an area, and in fact a pretty unfruitful area. As you guys are walking through, you see enormous sweeping farms. That's bad news for an area like this. Normally, you want smaller. When there are smaller farms run by serfs, it's because they have plenty of work to do on this small area. But as you guys have traveled through this countryside, you've seen these massive sweeping areas where they're just trying to get enough food to feed their families, let alone pay taxes to whatever petty baron runs this place. Yeah, you are now on the capital, or on the outskirts of the capital, known as Earnhold, and you three are engaged in a card game with on this early morning with the rest of your group. Two of your companions have gone out. Your Rez Kalin, your swordsman and sort of royal guard that's traveling with you, went ahead to scout the area and make sure that everything's clear on your way to the capital, because this is a place where a lot of bandits might set up shop. and your good friend now, who you've gotten to know very well over this last week of traveling, Ablaka Ashad, a literal angel, has gone in to speak with an alchemist about getting a rather large spear removed from his torso. He wanted to keep it in. If you missed it last week, good guy Ablaka Ashad has had a spear in him for a couple of weeks, so that a blood mage in somewhere else in this kingdom can continue gaining power through the pain that it causes him. As drastic as it sounds, and as macabre, Ablaka Ashad was happy to do it because, in his own words, hey, my pain tolerance is like pretty high up there, and I know that blood mage is going to use it for healing more than anything else, so I know that I'm doing good by keeping this spear in me. However, your brave and fearless leader, Vizier Kama, was not having it, because it turns out when you're wandering through streets and people run into you and one of you is an 8-foot tall dude with a spear through him, it raises some serious questions. Did you take this clearly an angel person captive? Did you try to kill him? What's up with your whole deal? You're definitely not just merchants. And so, reluctantly, Ablaka Ashad finally agreed to have the spear removed, but only on one condition: that he go and speak to an alchemist, because he knew that once the spear was removed, he would leak a significant amount of ichor, the blood that angels have that has immense healing properties. He knew an alchemist would pay well for it and be able to get that healing power to a lot of people. So Ablaka Ashad left early this morning to speak with an alchemist in a small town on these outskirts just outside of Ernhold, to have the spear removed and the ichor gathered, just to do as much good as he can. So, let me bring this up. So yeah, to pass the time, you three, your two companion casters, the witch known as Elway and the inheritor Yasika, the strange traveling companions as you've ever had. The five of you casters, as well as Pater Ullman, a man of the church who has taken a vow of poverty, and yet was given a pouch of money by a pitying Rez Kalen, who wanted Pater Ullman to be able to play as well. The six of you are engaged in this card game, known as the Gilded Gambit, and we'll cut to each of you. For narrative purposes, I'm going to let you have a hand in deciding how you're doing, because there are a number of ways you could each approach it. We'll start with Alberth. Alberth, there are two options that you have here for how well you're doing. Again, for our new viewers, the real gimmick of this campaign is that each time I give the players, or ask the players what they're doing, I give them a set number of options so that they always have a good option to choose from. If their character knows something about the world, or if there's just a uniquely well scripted option that we don't have to roll off the cuff, I'll give it to them ahead of time. That way there's always an option, but they always also have the option to go off script and decide. So, but Hayden, for Alberth's two preset options, are you using a symbiotic link to sort of mind meld with Keath, your longtime traveling companion and partner in crime? Not necessarily crime. It's just a phrase. You could be using the symbiotic link to team up, know what's in one another's hands, and communicate about who might be doing well, who might be doing poorly. And if one of you bluffs, the other person could support it. If one of you goes all in, the other person just knows what's up. You could be using that symbiotic link to work together with Keath. Or you could be taking a fall. It is a very familiar role for Alberth to sort of be the voluntary butt of the joke, and to just be someone that's vulnerable enough or familiar enough that you can approach. And very often that means losing at a card game with and only bringing to the table money that you're ready to lose. Because in your experience, even though it feels like like you look foolish when something like that happens, in your vast experience, people tend to like you a lot more when they know you can take an L, and it makes people more comfortable around you. Especially because you guys have been in combat in the last week. You've been attacked 3 times by this small group of assassins. They seem to be working with mercenaries and bandits and whoever they can get on board. And there's a number of dangerous casters. And now these people have seen you in combat symbiotically linked with Keath. And so they've seen you become a predator, become a lithe, unnatural being. And that added to the fact of your unique invention, the gun, a trigger-loaded bolt-firing mechanism, it can be easy for people to become intimidated by you unless you sort of deliberately let your guard down and show a little more restraint and sort of turn the other cheek a little more often. It helps people be more comfortable with you, and you very often find yourself in a sort of unnatural leader role where people tease you the most, but they also listen to you the most. So those are your 2 options. Are you using the symbiotic link to help your chances and Keith's, or are you taking a fall to continue your role as the approachable, often butt of the joke?
Second option. Yep.
Right on. Feels very appropriate for Alberth. So Alberth is just losing petty change, a couple of coppers at a time. No big deal. But the environment is very friendly, very warm, and everyone seems to think a little better of Alberth as a result. And as a result of that, you feel that symbiotic link growing, the link that you have with other people with whom you work closely, the link that you are preternaturally aware of being a symbiote druid. Your connection with a wild folk patron gives you this intuitive sense of whether a relationship is symbiotic or parasitic, and you feel that those bonds of strong cooperation building between you and your companions. Next up is Merigold. Merigold, you similarly have 2 options of how you're approaching this game. Are you A, abstaining from play, knowing that gambling is a problematic addiction for you, and are instead playing your loot and just adding to the jovial environment and refraining from something that you know could be harmful? Or are you indulging a little bit in your addiction and using the added benefit of your mage spells, using the uniquely magely ability to compel indiscretion, to call out other people's bluffs and do better at the card game?
Yeah, I think I'd be playing the card game.
Right on.
Doing that. Option 2.
Sweet. No other mages in the party means no one else has the potential to have to use a psychic ward, at least not from their own abilities. So you are able to use this at will, and several people, or during several hands where you're unsure of whether to raise, your companions find themselves unwittingly spilling the beans about the contents of their hand and about their chances of winning. You are doing.
This actually raises a question for me.
Oh yes.
How often are we able to cast those spells we have?
Almost indiscriminately. But you found that the more you use it, just like working a muscle too hard, it starts to work less and less when you do it a bunch subsequently. But Keath has also noticed that repeated use, just like a muscle, builds your ability to use it. And so everyone's different usage of the same spell could be a little bit different because of how many times they sort of flex that muscle, how often they work their spells. So this is an excellent exercise for Merigold in his usage of the mage spell, the mage compulsion spell, Compel Indiscretion. But that brings us to Keath. Keath, in playing this card game, are you A, using your sense of the predator-prey mentality to detect when people feel confident in their cards, and when they're feeling more afraid or more concerned, when they're bluffing out of false bravado, the kind of bravado that leads a lizard to puff up that ring around its neck, the kind of bravado that causes prey animals to pretend they're bigger and more dangerous than they are, or when their signals of confidence are more like the rattle of a snake or the growling of a tiger. When their displayed confidence is really the sign of a confidence well earned. You could be using that predator-prey mentality to know when people feel confident in their cards, using that knowledge to do better in the game. Or is Keath barely playing the game, not that interested in the monetary value of these little discs that everyone passes around so that they can like hunt their own food and rent shelter from people? Are you instead steering the conversation towards what you really want to talk about? Dwarves and where to find them.
It's definitely going to be my aim to talk about dwarves, for sure. Can I also double it as trying to scope which people are more commonly, like, prey mentality?
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of getting a profile on everyone.
Exactly.
Right on. Yeah, you start to develop a sense. I'll go through your companions. First of all, Alberth, you know really well. It's given you a new perspective on the sort of prey mentality, in fact, that very often when someone shows vulnerability, it is more a sign of confidence and competence than it really is like
weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And you're starting to question, in fact, that predator-prey mentality, whether that's a really appropriate term to apply to humans. It certainly is sometimes, and your usage of spells like Compel Adrenaline has shown that sometimes people can be forced into that binary decision-making of do they need to run away or can they take it all right now? When forced into that position, people tend to be classified as a predator, being in a predator mentality or in a prey mentality, in sort of a winner versus loser mentality. But in social situations, there's infinitely more nuance, and you're beginning to realize that that prey and weakness are not synonyms. They're related concepts, but there's a certain offset there. Yeah, looking around, you see that Yasika almost never enters a prey mentality. Yasika's the big inheritor, the sort of paladin-like companion, never takes off her sterling silver armor, and is currently trying to figure out whether it's ethical to literally shackle Elway's legs. And she does carry, like, shackles, like cold iron shackles. I should recap a little bit. Elway the Witch is the prisoner of Yasika the Inheritor, which is being having their patrons as wraiths, the inhabitants of the Nightlands, one of the 8 worlds surrounding the mortal plane. Wraiths are wraiths are the sort of embodiments of chaos, really, and witches are therefore agents of chaos. Sowing dissension is particularly among systems of injustice or oppression or tyranny. Witches are charged with disrupting those systems and sowing the seeds of worthwhile chaos, righteous chaos even. And in exchange, wraiths give them supernatural powers. Elway, one of your companions, is one of these. Yasika, polar opposite. We had discussed briefly last week the idea that some of the planes have opposites, that there's this theory that each of the planes outside, or each of the worlds outside of the mortal plane, is diametrically opposed to another. And Solari, the world of those of the sun who give inheritors their powers, is diametrically opposed with the Nightlands, the world of the wraiths who give witches their powers. And so it makes sense that these two would be natural enemies. Their relationship is more complex than that, and it sounds like Yasika has arrested Elway and intends to bring her before several people who Yasika believes that Elway has wronged. On counts of what sounds like thievery and arson is what she accused her of in front of the group. Elway seems deeply unconcerned by all of this and claims that Yasuka has arrested her no less than 3 times in the last year alone, and that Elway has escaped judgment each time. Theirs is a complex...
Currently like the person who got captured, are they injured, if I remember right?
Not anymore. Having traveled with Abulka Ashad and his angelic healing aura, you are all doing well. In fact, the person most recently injured was you, Keath. After the last fight with these would-be assassins, you were coughing up blood, but you healed miraculously quickly around Abulka Ashad. This is a good time to mention, however, that Keath hasn't been entirely honest with his companions. In fact, he began coughing blood about an hour before the fight. It seems that a problem that he had been putting off for a long time is finally beginning to catch up with him. You know the signs of the of your disease.
The skulking end.
The skulking end. You've had it for a long time, and this, the red cough, what the physicians call it, is the first sign of the final stage. Degeneration begins quickly, and it starts in the lungs, but it enters the brain soon thereafter. You know to start looking for visual hallucinations as the next sign that the end is upon you. You're not sure exactly how much time you have left, but something tells you that spending time around Abulka Ashad is the best thing you can do right now.
Do I know if that has any effect on a symbiotic relationship, just in general? No one specifically.
Oh. You are not sure. It doesn't seem to... You don't think that it's...
I'm sure it won't, spread that way, but would he feel symptoms? Would he share a hallucination, perhaps?
That is a very worthwhile experiment. You're not sure. The symbiotic link allows you to share skills, experience, muscle memory, but not directly memories, and not directly sensation. You sort of share a sense of alertness or panic, so when one of you notices something, the other person is very aware of it, but they don't know the exactness, they just know the feelings that are associated with it. So if you see a large animal jumping towards you and it scares you, the other person who you're symbiotically linked with will feel that surprise and panic, but they won't receive a message that's like, there's a bear. They will just know that something is wrong. But when it comes to neurological symptoms, you're no healer, and you have no idea if that's the kind of thing that could spread via symbiotic link. However, you are pretty confident in your assumption that it wouldn't last. Like, if you were to have a hallucination during a symbiotic link and then the symbiotic link was broken, you don't think it would spread from host to host. But it's a good question whether or not that person would be able to experience the same visual hallucinations as you. Anyway, you know what to look out for next. And yeah, going through that predator-prey mentality. I was talking about Yasuka and Elway. Elway is hard to pin down whether she's ever in a predator mentality, a prey mentality. She seems content to let things, let many events and happenings pass over her. She doesn't feel the need to take an active hand in what's happening. That feels like a prey mentality, but she never feels threatened. Largely, you've only sensed a predator mentality from Elway when people bring up something that she doesn't like. And because of your unique sense for this predator-prey mentality, you have picked up her signs of irritation and sort of exasperation. Her predator mentality tends to be represented more as sarcasm or social aggression than physically wanting to attack something. But when Pater Ullman talks about his role in the church, she seems upset. When Yasuka talks about Elway's crimes, she doesn't seem upset. But there have been a couple. When she brings up arson specifically, Elway seems upset at her usage of the term or her definition of that crime, or maybe her bringing up in front of a group. Elway seems upset by that.
Yep, I ship it. I ship it twice now.
Miles is officially on the record as double shipping it. It's upgraded from a sloop to a galleon, if you will.
Oh man.
I don't get all of my knowledge about
this
the
weekend.
Yeah, I don't get all of my knowledge about the world from video games. I don't know what you mean. Anyways, back to the barony, which is a type of fiefdom. Let's see here. So yeah, that's the predator-prey mentality. You haven't detected a predator mentality from Peter Ullman once. Not once. He seems to take a passive role in everything in which he's engaged. He also kind of seems to gel with Elway. Like, they seem to get along, which is strange because of Elway's apparent, like, irritation at his role in the church, or maybe with the Church of the Mountain itself, and not really with Peter Ullman's involvement in it. But of course you know that witches are dedicated to disrupting systems that they find unjust, and so it could be just Elway's problem with the establishment itself, or something tells you maybe any establishment at all just kind of sets her off. She seems fine to be on this quest for the crown. And Vizier Kama had sort of implied that her dossier from the Master of Wishes and Whispers, that her dossier on Elway had implied that she would be all right, and not a sort of threat to national security, if I can use a deeply modern phrase talking about this kingdom. She seemed comfortable with it. And from your interactions with her, Elway has been hugely personable and hugely on board for this whole quest, even though she's like a prisoner during all of it. She also hasn't taken the opportunity to like run during any intense combats or anything, so she seems like she's in it for the long haul. Anyways, all of that to say, your unique perception of the predator-prey juxtaposition there has informed how you play this card game and is telling you a lot about your companions. The only person who is here but not playing is Vizier Kama, who is like on the lookout, sitting atop one of your covered wagons, just sort of scanning the horizons. But yeah, you guys continue to play. Mostly Merigold is like putting away some cash. He's getting the pot pretty consistently, and as he does so, a fevered look in his eyes sort of builds over time. Like he's too ready to win this. His hand is too quick to reach out and grab the pot. Probably not enough that you guys, and it's at this point that I'm going to invoke separation of player knowledge from character knowledge. It's probably not enough for you guys to come to the conclusion he likely has a gambling addiction related to his alcohol addiction. You guys don't necessarily know either of those, unless Merigold has done a pretty bad job in the last week of sort of hiding those details about himself. But you guys hear Vizier Kama kind of leans over and shushes you guys, and points over the horizon and like drops down from the covered wagon to like peek out from behind it. Again, tiny woman, but still very intimidating. She has the rapier and the knife each at her belt, and now the glaive across her back, which looks absurd because it's a glaive built for like, you know, your average warrior, maybe between 5'8" and 6 foot, and so it is the angle that it's at, like the normal polearm angle is sort of right here, and the angle it's at is sort of like down here, so that it doesn't scrape across the ground everywhere she goes. The clearance on this would be a problem if she went to any doorways. But she points to the distance. It doesn't take you guys long to figure out that the figure approaching you isn't Rez Kalen, it's Abelka Ashad. His height is the first giveaway, and as he gets closer, you guys see the sort of sphere of golden light that encompasses his head at all times. It's kind of like a sphere, but it's more like any angle you look at him, there's a perfect circle where he's like always backlit by the sun. Or not the sun, because the sun emits a sort of cold light, and this is a warm light, if you're familiar with cold light versus warm light. I don't know if you guys are big interior decorators, but that's a whole thing. And in fact, important to the magic system, because those of the sun tend to be represented by like cold light, this sort of unforgiving, pure white light, almost blue, and angels tend to have more of a hearth glow to them, a very warm, almost amber glow. But that's enough waxing poetic. This absurdly tall, 7 to 8 foot tall man, just broadly built, strolls back in, gaping hole still in his like tunic, right here, and shooting out from his side. Of course, he no longer has the spear, having now seen the alchemist, and he approaches you guys carrying a big old bag over his shoulder. He walks up and says, "Hey guys, how's the game going?"
Good. Can we deal you in?
Yeah, right on. I don't have any money, but what I do have is gifts for everyone. And he unslings the bag and starts digging through it as he explains, you know, I wanted the alchemist to have the ichor that I knew was going to be the result of my big old spear wound, and he points to it, and he does still have like an open wound that's actively sealing, but he's no longer like actively or like dripping ichor. Apparently it was all that was going to come out was collected by the alchemist, but he is healing at a rate that like you can watch the wound close. Not immediately, he's not Wolverine, but he's close. As Abakar Shad walks back towards your card game, you guys feel the same energy that you first felt when he showed up, of this very relaxing, positive presence. It's easier to get along around Elysian, and actually none of you have met another Elysian, another angel, other than Abakar Shad, so you don't know how much of this is just his like very, very wholesome
It's like bravado.
Yeah. You don't know how much is his vibe and how much is like the unique and like magical presence of an otherworlder. But yeah, he begins to dole out the presents that he explains. Iger's like, it goes for a lot, and the alchemist was ready to give me a lot. I wanted to make sure he would give it to the people who needed it, so he got every last drop. But he had some pretty nice stuff, and I thought, I know who could use this. And he starts pulling all of these little gifts out of his bag. Let's see, I do want to mention as well before I start describing the gifts. Alberth, we had talked earlier about your sense of bonds, of symbiotic and parasitic bonds. You can sense strong symbiotic bonds between Abakar Shad and nearly every member of your group. His presence has not only acted as a practical healing effect, he's also like resolved interpersonal conflicts. He's talked to everyone about like what's going on in their life, and he's a uniquely easy person to open up to. And you're not, again, it's unclear how much of this is like his angelic aura and how much of it is just his willingness to talk and his selflessness and his sort of emotional intelligence, that as a symbiote druid, you're very clocked in about how people interact with each other and how it benefits who. And that kind of emotional intelligence is really unprecedented from what you've seen, that Abakar Shad is just that uniquely able to connect with people. So you detect that symbiotic link between him and almost everybody, except for something that you had actually detected for the first time a couple of days ago, a parasitic link between him and Vizier Kama. Vizier Kama is a very domineering person. She wants to be in charge, and a couple days ago you detected that Abakar Shad was giving up more than he was gaining by being around Vizier Kama. It's a parasitic bond in which Vizier Kama was directly benefiting, her goals were being furthered, and Abakar Shad was was not benefiting. In fact, she had him leave to go get this spear removed, despite his many protests that it was doing as much, or he was doing more good by having it in him. She decided that the group's goals were more important than him keeping that. And concerned about this, you had actually talked to Abulkashad, but he explained that, to his view, he explained that he was aware of the idea of a symbiotic versus parasitic bond, and aware of a druid's innate ability to sense that. But he also wanted you to know that, in his mind, as long as more good was coming of the bond than bad, even though he wasn't the benefactor of that bond, he was all right with it, and that it wasn't a permanent solution, but it was all right that she was benefiting more than he was, or that he was temporarily suffering for it. Not sure how Alberth feels about that, but that was Abulkashad's approach to it. So he is aware of it and is voluntarily continuing that relationship. But other than that, strong symbiotic bonds. It does seem like Abulkashad is getting a lot from his relationships here, wants to be here with everybody. So, the first thing that Abel pulls out is a small tincture, which he hands to Elway, explaining that the alchemist said that if you're emotionally equipped to have like a really dissociative experience, this can free your mind of all sorts of assumptions. I know that's kind of your thing. It seemed like something I would get for you. And Elway's like, I have to get in the right posture for this. Nice. And she takes the tincture and just like smiles, and they have a pleasant interaction. Next for
that was the most like clinical way to say, if you are down to get high, man, have I got the thing for you.
Yes, but you notice that Abulkashad phrased it in a way that was very
super positive, yeah.
Yeah, talking about freeing her mind from unfair assumptions. That's witch shit right there. That's what a witch is all about. That's the phrasing that she would prefer. That's, yeah. He did not bring that for everybody. Yasuka seems very upset about this. She's, no good could possibly come of that. And he says, well, that's why I didn't get you this. Hopefully some good will come of this. And he pulls out a large and very fine whetstone, the kind that you use to sharpen a blade. He says, I noticed that yours was getting pretty worn down. You put some miles on that one, so here's a new one for you. And Yasuka seems touched. Like she takes it and doesn't know what to say. She after a moment kind of starts to say something, senses that her voice is going to crack, and kind of clears her throat. She says, thank you. That's I will do good with this. I will do some good. And Abulkashad nods, and he's like, all right, but don't use that sword unless you have to. Yasuka's, yeah, fine. Next, he turns to Merigold and pulls out a small satchel and opens it up to show that there is a fine pink powder inside. He hands it to you and explains, so that the way the alchemist, what he told me this is good for, this is Fireheart powder. And it's good to clear the mind, and it accelerates the metabolism. And I know a lot of mages use it. Sorry, I really wish I had gotten to know you better. I don't feel like I got a very personalized gift for you. And he hands it to you and he moves on. Merigold realizes something that Abulkashad is not saying here. Fireheart powder, Merigold is a student of many fields of study, and herbology isn't a particular field of interest, but it's something that you've sort of done it's part of your general education, I would call it, especially as a noble son of a major house in Venel. You know your herbs, and Fireheart powder is often used by mages, so that's a good excuse for him to give it to you, but more often it's used to treat addictions. That when it's used by people those recovering from addictions to keep a clear head when they're Like at their lowest, it sort of accelerates the mind. It actually actively clears toxins from the bloodstream pretty quickly, which is why a bunch of mages use it, so they can drink and still be able to cast at a moment's notice. They just down some Fireheart powder. If they're classy, they drink it. If they're not so classy, they just do a full line of it. It's not like cocaine. Like, it's not like you're not jittery, but it does really clear out the mind, and it sort of resets your mentality, which is why it's good for a lot of addicts. It's sort of like that visualize your goals, that Stephen R. Covey, like, flick the rubber band against your wrist thing. It's supposed to, like, remind you of when you were in a better mindset and made a better goal. Fireheart powder is a way to chemically do that. And so you think that he's doing this whole, like, you're a mage, I don't know, this is what mages do. He's using that as an excuse so that he doesn't have to, like, narrate in front of this group that, hey, this is in case you want to get better. Next up, he turns to Keath. He says, Keath, tell me more about those swords, bud, because I love to hear about those swords.
I pull him in. I tell him how I've been studying, like, dwarven smithing for forever, and how I want to incorporate a bunch of different designs, like the curve and the bezel and how the different hilts come together, kind of stuff like that.
Right on. And he listens very actively and seems like super genuinely interested in what's going on. He says, man, that's so cool. I've traveled for a long time. I've been in this world for maybe 200 years. And it's rare that someone gets to show me something that I haven't seen before. You're a really cool guy, Keath, and I'm really glad we met. So
what a guy.
So, he says, reaching into his bag, I talked to the alchemist about Tiefstahl, which is, of course, the name of the ancient dwarven metal that you use. You only recently learned from Abukashad himself, who knew several dwarves before the sort of genocide that ended 40 years ago. He knew a little bit of the dwarven language because he makes an effort to learn as many languages as possible because he likes to interact one-on-one with people from all sorts of different backgrounds. He explained that the dwarves are very picky about who they share their culture with. I'm sorry, I should say we're very picky about who they should share their culture with. But I picked up a little bit of what I could, and Tiefstahl, interestingly enough, there's it contains two dwarven roots that have sort of been used as loan terms or loan roots that have been incorporated into the common tongue. Teeth being an ancient predecessor of the word deep, and Stahl, of course, became steel. So you should know that in the modern tongue, the name for the metal your swords are made of, it's deep steel. I just think that's pretty rad, and I thought you would think that's pretty rad. You know what I'm saying?
It's pretty rad.
Yeah. So you had that conversation a couple of days ago, but now he pulls out, he says, I talked to the alchemist about deep steel, and he mentioned that normal weapon oil isn't going to work. I know I've never seen you take care of it because you know that normal weapon oil is going to degrade that special metal. Well, I don't know how confident you are in trusting the word of just like a local alchemist. He seemed to really know his stuff, and he said that he had an oil that would work and didn't have the complex chains that would degrade your weapon. And so, again, up to you whether you want to trust that, but I thought it would be worth grabbing a little vial for you. And he pulls out an actually pretty sizable vial and sort of like wiping rag that's made of like a fine-grained cloth that's like very good for treating weapons like that. And he hands you this special weapon oil. It's not something that's really talked about a lot in D&D because who would want to like take a moment to be like, okay, I use the proper weapon steel and I spend about 24 minutes treating my. I mean, I've had DMs like that for sure, but weapon oil and like weapon maintenance is actually a huge deal for something like this, and it's something that you weren't able to carry out on your swords. They haven't started degrading yet, but if you only treat your weapon when it's starting to break down, you're too late to properly treat the weapon. So he hands you this great boon that's going to help you keep your swords intact.
Fantastic. That's actually freaking awesome.
Yeah. So he goes and has private conversations with Pater Ullman and takes out a thing that he's going to give to Rez Kalen later. But last he comes over to Alberth, and he pulls out 3 small vials of a shimmering golden liquid that's the same sort of warm amber as the glow that surrounds him at all times in his Lycian halo. He hands them to you, and he puts them in your hand, and then does that thing where like he clasps his hand around your hand with the items and like brings you close, and very quietly, not like grabbing the attention of everyone, because he's kind of giving everyone these a little bit one-on-one. He says, "This is a special gift for you. I saved a little bit of the ichor. I don't know about in your culture if that's... I know that can seem a little macabre. I would feel like it's a little weird if you handed me like a vial of your blood, but among my people, this is a symbol of a stronger bond than friendship. It means we're brothers."
Thanks, Abel.
Yep. And he
This
gives,
means a lot.
Yeah. He holds you in like a long embrace and says, "Anyway, don't drink it. You can... It has healing powers.
Okay.
You can apply it to wounds, like external wounds, but under no circumstances should you put that in your body. It's... Don't do that. People used to do it, and there was sort of like this myth about gaining powers. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a chance you gain some powers. There's also a chance
You
of
shouldn't have told me that.
internal bleeding. No,
Okay.
Bud?
Glad you told me that.
Internal
Yes, okay.
bleeding is the much higher probability. I need you to know that.
Understood.
Okay, sweet.
Okay, player to GM though. How much does this healing factor eliminate internal bleeding? I'm just saying.
You're gonna have to ask him. You've never met an angel before. We can't do this player to DM. This has to be Keath to Abel.
No, I'm not in the conversation. I didn't hear that.
Right on. I should also mention, for Merigold, this Fireheart powder might represent a decision of sorts, and maybe this is intentional on Abel's part, but this Fireheart powder could be used to try and cold turkey it, something that Merigold has probably tried to do in the past. That's something that's just genuinely really hard, especially we're talking medieval era. There's not like support groups for this. There's not a lot of culture around trying to prevent or treat addiction, and the realities of your lifespan mean that a lot of people just aren't going to get this kind of thing treated. The realities of the medical field, it's like addiction is a brutal road to walk for anyone, but in terms of medieval realities, it doesn't get easier. So Fireheart powder could be used to walk that road of recovery. That's the hard path to tread, but it could also be used to clear your mind after you drink. That you could theoretically, with this powder, and it's a sizable satchel of powder, you could indulge in your addiction and still be able to recover your spellcasting really quickly. It wouldn't endanger you as much anymore. Maybe that's deliberate on Abel's part, that he doesn't want to be like, you have an addiction, I know what's going on, and I can fix you. But he wants to give you that option. If it needs to get fixed, here's something that'll let you. And if you just need a short-term solution that you need to be able to cast, I also want you to be able to cast. And that's all implicit. None of that is explicitly stated, probably on purpose. But that's the dilemma that Merigold is presented with this Fireheart powder. Anyway, Abelkashad gathers everyone around, has everyone sort of sit down cross-legged in this little circle. He says, "Hey, while we're waiting for Rez Kalen, do you guys want to talk about the attacks? there have been a couple, and I know that can be a really hard experience to go through. I feel like we should be able to talk about it. As a quick recap, which actually Abel provides, saying like, I don't, or it might be better to hear it from someone else. You don't have to go through your events, but here's how I understand it. And he recaps the 3 attacks that have happened since you left the Red Reach. Each time has come with more and more people. The time when the horses were attacked, it was just 4 attackers, and you guys weren't there. But ever since then, they've been hiring more and more what appear to be like mercenaries, bandits, knights errant, soldiers for hire, to attack you as a caravan. And you're not sure what they've been telling these people or if they're just working for pay. But there are 4 sort of officers, or 4 casters, you're pretty sure, that have been attacking you, and somehow you haven't managed to kill any of them. A bunch of their lackeys, the people that they've brought on, the hirelings, you've been able to take care of, which is, sad in its own way, because they don't necessarily have anything against you. They were just trying to get money. But you obviously don't know your attackers' names, but Elway has come up with nicknames that she's started calling them just as shorthand. The most intimidating one, the one that sticks out to all of you, is the Claw. There is a tall, muscular man who is one of your primary attackers. His defining feature is that he's tough all over. He holds a shield in one arm, but his primary arm, his right arm, is an enormous claw. Not the claw of a wolf or a tiger, not the claw of any kind of mammal, really. It is a lobster claw, like a full crustacean claw. Alberth and Keath recognized this as a mutant druid, a rarer type of druid who gets their power from a mutated wild folk, someone who takes adaptability to its furthest extremes. Sorry, just want to make sure, Miles, you dropped out of frame. Do you still have the headphones on? You're still up to date on
I'm
Right, sweet. Just wanted to make sure. But yeah, Alberth and Keath recognized this guy as a mutant druid, probably the first mutant druid that you would ever run into, because they're just exceedingly rare.
Is there any kind of stigma, like a social stigma towards mutant druids, for giving up pieces of themselves to further their own physical gains, I guess?
Absolutely. And it's less that people are like, oh, mutant druids are like freaks. Mutant druids are someone that we should exclude from society. It's more like they haven't heard of mutant druids, and they think that people with giant lobster claws are freaks who should be excluded from society. So it's not deliberate or systemic, but it is pretty universal that these people with these wild adaptations, pretty hated. And maybe there are exceptions of someone with just the head of a wolf or something wild like that, just saves a town and they like him now. But as a general rule, people are like, hey, what's that weird shit? Get that out of here. I'm not about it. So, the Claw seems to be calling the shots, or maybe he just gives the impression that he's calling the shots, because it's a truly intimidating presence on a battlefield to have just a guy who's shield bashing a little bit, and then a Claw that's large enough to just snap a whole head off. So far, he hasn't snapped anyone's head off. In fact, you guys have been able to fight off the attacks pretty well, but mostly they go for the horses pulling the 2 carriages, or they try and injure you in a way that limits your mobility. It seems less like they're going for the throat and more like they don't want you to get to the capital. So maybe assassins is the wrong term. Maybe it's more like saboteurs, but we're going to keep going with the term assassins for now.
Does it seem like they're really going...
Say again?
Go for it.
I was wondering if they seem like they're specifically trying to stop us really hard, or does it seem a little bit more half-hearted as they're trying to just take out the horses?
It seemed it did seem more like a sabotage mission than an assassination mission, and they're maybe not really trying to kill you, for a while, because they targeted the horses first and like the wheels of the carriages and that kind of thing. Rez Kalen was your local swordsman, your royal guardsman, was pretty confident in this theory, but when he was like in one-on-one combat with the Claw actually had a moment of like a gap in Rez Kalen's defenses and really went for the head and just tried to snip off the whole thing. And Rez Kalen was tackled out of the way by an unnaturally lithe Keath, who kind of tackled, rolled, skidded to a stop, pulled out his two swords in a very cool maneuver. But that theory pretty much went kaput. They are trying to kill you, but it seems like they think the best way to do that is to limit your movement, because you're not going to give up your cargo, and if they make it so you can't go anywhere, it's much easier to pick you off. So it seems more like a strategy than a different end goal. Or maybe they're fine with killing Rez Kalen, but don't want to kill all of you. That could also be a thing. So yeah, the Claw, very intimidating. Main bad guy. Next up is the Mask. An agile fighter who has this sort of featureless black mask that just looks like an orb. It's like the EV helmet from Halo. But it's sleek black. It might be made of obsidian. It's like dark and shiny, just very reflective. Maybe that's supposed to be like a statement. Ooh, a mask that's a mirror. It's whoever's overrated. What are you, a sorcerer? Are you trying to write poetry? You some kind of warrior poet? Get out of here with that. Unfortunately, they're also an incredibly intimidating warrior. They use a whip knife, which is like a long rope that's got a handle tied around one hand, but the other hand can like slide up and down the rope, and it swings out up to like 15 feet. This is a long weapon, and it's just a knife on the end of a rope, but it's like a silk rope, and the mask tends to like wrap people around the ankles like a whip and pull them back, or will like pull a full loop, so it's a much shorter range weapon, so they can make multiple fast attacks instead of just this big sweeping Dark Souls attack. But yeah, whip knife, very intimidating. They seemed to be trying to cause cuts, like slices, not always like lethal. They weren't always going for the throat, and they built a sort of battle momentum that leads Merigold, your local caster expert, to believe that the Mask is actually a blood mage, like actually pulling some of their power from the pain that they inflict during combat. Yeah, we had talked about two archetypes of blood mage: the flagellants who tend to gain power from their own pain, which is one of the most potent sources of power for a sanguine caster, and the seekers of the chalice, who gain just as much power from ecstasy as pain, and tend to throw parties more than they like torture people, but they've been known to do both. This is a third kind called a blood seeker that tends to cause harm in combat and gains a lot of their power for more combat through that. So yeah, the Claw and the Mask. Next up is the Duelist. The Mask is not the only sort of agility, dexterity-based character. They also have a woman whose blonde hair is constantly pulled into a ponytail. It's very long for someone who's like in melee combat all the time. Not generally a good idea to have long hair in combat, or at least a better idea to put it in a bun or something. She wields two rapiers, which, by the way, is an absurd thing to do. Who would do that? But she exhibits a level of dexterity and aerial prowess that leads you to believe she can't just be mortal. She has to be a caster, or she has to be imbued with some kind of power. There are non-casters who still have otherworldly power, and I mean otherworldly literally. It's from one of 8 otherworlds. But she could be a werewolf. That's unlikely. She's never had like claws. She could be a vampire. She could have like Lycian blood. Lycians are the only otherworld race or otherworld, the only group of otherworlders who have ever like mixed genetic material with humans. There's no half wild folk or half razorkin or half wraiths. It's just Lysians. And so you would think that that's not how that bloodline would manifest, but somehow she can leap 15 feet in the air in an arcing sweep, and it's very intimidating and just deeply hard to catch. We had talked in our very first session about the way prey moves, like the way a stag moves through the forest, of that kind of prancing thing that can seem random to us, but is actually really hard to close in on if you're in chase. She moves like that, in just arcing leaps. It's like playing Smash Bros against Zero Suit Samus. It's absurd. Last is the Bard. There's one guy who just plays a flute and then everyone else moves faster, and he keeps casting frost magic at everybody. Sorcerers have like really elemental magic usually, and sorcerers, like we had talked about in the first session, use like their dedication to an art or a craft to gain their power. Apparently he's a flautist and just plays the flute to make everyone move faster, and then occasionally breathes frost breath at you like some kind of blue dragon. Froze Elway half to death. Yeah, she might still be recovering from hypothermia, and someone should probably check on her. But frost breath bard who plays the flute and makes everyone go faster, which is an intimidating, like, obviously, the swordswoman already moving very fast. The mask already moving very fast. So having them move faster, very intimidating, very threatening. But even more than that, the claw was not moving fast. And to have him sped up even a little, crazy. So, those are the four. The claw, the mask, the duelist, and the bard are the four sort of officers, the four casters or otherwise magically imbued people who have been hunting you. They appear to be a competent team. They really know how to work together. And while all have been wounded in one fight or another, none of them have been killed. Just their lackeys. But it's been a few days since that last attack, and you have reason to hope that you've shaken them. That they're off your tail. But it's important that you keep a low profile, because if they hear, oh, a well-armored, like, magic caravan is traveling through these parts, guess we know where to go next. Eventually Rez Kalen returns, and Vizier Kama asks everyone, or gathers everyone, says, all right, enough with the cards. It's, we have to go speak to the Baron. I'm hopeful that once we, speak to him privately, explain that we're on a mission for the Queen, that he'll be able to give us reinforcements. Some swordsmen, some basic caravan guards. They've got lackeys, we need lackeys. That's basically it. And I don't have the funds, like, with the caravan right now to secure lackeys. And the only competent soldiers in this tiny barony are going to be the ones directly employed by the Baron. So we're going to need some manpower. We're going to get it from him. Some of your powers, I'm more familiar with some of your powers. It's worth noting, no one in this group except Keath knows that Alberth is a druid. Still. They've seen Alberth move unnaturally lively, but they don't know about the symbiotic link. They just think he's like a secret badass, like when Yoda like drops the cane and is just flipping everywhere. I don't know how I feel about that, but we don't have to go into Star Wars right now. So yeah, they just think Alberth is a sweet warrior with a gun. Yeah, she says, but I know some of your powers make you good with people. So who thinks they should stay with the caravan, and who thinks they should come with me because they're good with people and they can talk to people? I'm kind of looking at you, Albert. You have a weird charisma around you, and I still can't clock it.
Yeah, I'm definitely saying I'm not going anywhere. This is not my expertise.
Good call.
Keath, I think you're great with people.
Yeah, I'm good at making people do what I want by scaring them.
Hopefully we won't have to resort to that. So, yeah, you're good to stay with the caravan. Merigold, you like conned that tradesmaster, right? You want to come with me? You feel comfortable doing that? See?
Sorry, what's that?
Oh, Vizier Kama is
No,
saying you're good with people. You conned the writ of trade out of the tradesmaster, right? Do you want to come with me?
Sure, yeah.
Right
Sounds
on.
good.
Sweet. So Alberth, Merigold, anyone else? Yaska goes like, no, not me. And Elway goes, oh, then I'll go. And Yaska like places her hand firmly on Elway's shoulder, and Elway kind of like gives a shit-eating grin, like I knew I could cause her to react. And Pater Ullman says, I will of course attend to you. And Vizier Kama's like, yeah, yeah, thank you, Pater Ullman. And he nods very graciously. Right. Rez, and he goes, I'd rather stick with the caravan. She goes, yeah, that makes sense. All right, the rest of us, the forward party, let's go talk to the Baron. You guys start going into town. First thing you notice, she's not hiding it very much. Just right as you enter this capital of this barony, Ernhold, the capital of the Undery fiefdom. You get a lot of strange looks. Like there's not a lot of people who come through here, other than merchants, tradesmasters mostly, who obviously have that writ of trade that allows them to move between places without being rigorously questioned. You guys don't look exactly like tradesmasters. You're not. Maybe Alberth does because he has that red jacket. But tradesmasters tend to dress in a way that makes it clear, like I am wealthy. I am in the upper echelons of this sort of middle class that's between the peasantry and the nobility, and so they come off as sort of faux nobility. But of course, they also have a litany of guards with them at all times because they dress like that and make it very clear that they have a lot of good stuff with them. So Alberth looks like a trades master, but no one else in the group really does. Pater Ullman is obviously like a member of a clergy, and Vizier Kama is dressed in like Rhodes. She looks like a merchant or a mercenary more than anything else, and so Vizier Kama looks around and kind of clocks this as well, and ends up saying, Alberth, you should walk in front like you're in charge. Because I think it looks like the tradesmaster is following one of the people who looks like she's ready to stab someone. I think if you're in front, it looks more like we're a trade caravan. And sure enough, with Alberth walking in front and Vizier Kama like leaning forward and just like giving directions for where to go, you get a lot less weird stares. And so it's a little out of the ordinary when a woman looks at your group. The light of recognition like clicks on in her eyes, and she immediately closes in on you guys at a pace that Vizier Kama's like, oh, hold steady. And she's got the rapier, and she like clears her throat. Can I help you? And the woman like stops, and she looks at Vizier Kama and says, no. And she sturdily turns towards Merigold, walks up, and puts a finger right up in your face, like obnoxiously in your face. And she says, you have dishonored my name. You don't think you've ever seen this woman before in your life?
How have I dishonored
sorry,
your
man.
name?
Yeah,
Man.
how?
She narrows her eyes at you and shakes her head and makes this noise like she's tisking you.
Uh-huh.
And she says, in the town of Curtinhall, we had an agreement, and you left on me. You've seen
Do I know it?
Curtinhall on a map. You must have passed through that area on your way to Red Reach. You were not sober for any portion of the journey.
Oh.
she narrows her eyes as you look like confused, like you're trying to figure out what happened, and she takes a step back. She says, You have the audacity. Do you not remember me?
And I think you must be mistaken. You have the wrong guy.
By the mountain.
You're not ringing any bells here.
She takes off like her heavy traveling belt that's carrying pouches and throws it on the ground. By the mountains and the river. She unbuttons her cape and she takes the gauntlet off fingers at a time and slams it to the ground in front of you. And she puts her hand at the rapier at her side and she says, I demand satisfaction from you, sir.
So the caravan?
Sorry, say again. Your Discord cut out the beginning of it.
I said, I'm really glad I'm stuck in the caravan.
Do I have any, like, she's challenging me to a sword fight at this point. Do I have a sword? Do I know how to use a sword?
You might have started carrying like a really basic sword when you were walking through the Red Reach, because we had talked about the military culture there. Everyone kind of carries a sword whether they can use one or not. And so you probably still have a very basic sword that you wore because people kind of looked at you funny if you didn't. You definitely don't know how to use it well.
Okay. So it sounds like we should try to defuse this situation.
Yes, you
is
can.
What we should do.
You have several options here. I should mention. You can certainly duel her. You can invoke right of challenge, which means you can have someone else duel on your behalf. It's a little tacky to do so in this situation, but it's certainly an option. You could compel indiscretion and try and find out why she's mad at you, but you're pretty sure you know why she's mad at you, is the thing.
Yeah. But I'm going to do that anyways, and I'm going to compel indiscretion and say, surely we can come to some understanding, ma'am. Whatever I have done to you, I certainly don't remember, so it can't have been that bad. Surely we can come to some sort of an agreement about how to get past this.
Outrageous.
Outrageous.
She pulls out her rapier but doesn't like approach you. She just starts like storming in a circle, and she looks like she's conducting with a giant baton as she waves her rapier around. And everyone who kind of like saw a confrontation was like, yeah, whatever. What am I gonna do? Film it? This is the Dark Ages. No, everyone who kind of like, for propriety's sake, was like, all right, just let them do their thing. Now they're fully like, oh, there's no reason to look away and pretend I'm not secretly watching this. Yeah, go on, lady. What did he do? And she looks like she's conducting an orchestra with this rapier as she stomps around. She says, days and days of begging you came to me, and finally I relented. Yes, you can be my apprentice. I will teach you in the way of dancing steel. Next day, gone. Wild, and you come to me. What have I done to do wrong to you? I will cut out your innards, and I know you can't stop me, because I was the only one who could have taught you to stop me. On guard.
I'm going to be honest, that's not the indiscretion that I thought you were going to be angry about.
What? You pig!
Less severe than I was thinking.
She pulls out her other gauntlet and slaps it on the one next to you, and not waiting for you to respond at all, punches you in the stomach. She is a bizarrely strong woman. She's like wiry and thin, but it fully takes you to the ground. At least she didn't use the rapier. And Vizier Kama kind of steps in between you two and says, Lady Swordmaster, look, and she says, don't try to be condescending to me. Do not try to appease me. I will have this man's throat. She gestures emphatically with the rapier towards Merigold. And Vizier Kama goes, honestly, I kind of thought you slept with him too. and in a flash, Vizier Kama draws her steel, and the rapiers flash across one another, and they both narrow their eyes, like they're like, oh, is this happening? And there's a long moment of pause. Do you say anything to this pause, or do you just kind of let this situation play itself out?
I pulled out my lute and I strum a chord.
Vizier Kama is completely taken out of the situation by this, and turns towards you and turns towards her and goes, yeah, he's not worth it, do you? just do your thing. And without a second thought, without even fully looking down at you, this woman who has not introduced herself does an arcing sweep with her rapier, cuts through the 6 of your strings on your lute, and like cuts through the side of it with the rapier, reholsters it without looking at you, and storms away. Elway goes...
Better my lute strings than my throat, I suppose.
Elway goes, hey, you never gave us your name. And Vizier Kama goes, Elway, did you even come with us? And Elway goes, I wasn't supposed to. You hear clank, 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 as Yasuka pounds through the flagstone streets. And Elway goes, I gotta go. I'll see you guys at the caravan, and just ducks into an alleyway like a rogue.
Are you the only one at the caravan?
You, Rez Kalen, yep.
Nice.
It took a second for Yasuka to realize that Elway was gone, actually. But yes, you are now alone, and in fact, a single solitary figure appears on the outskirts of your vision. But by the time you get Rez Kalen to check it out with you, the figure has disappeared. Rez Kalen says, are you sure you saw someone? I can go check it out.
I'd probably scare them off. It's not my problem anyways.
Right on. And he doesn't take out his weapon, just goes back to leaning against the caravan. Yeah. And back at your group, this woman has destroyed Merigold's loot and stormed off. Vizier Kama looks like a little worried. She's like, oh, sorry, I kind of assumed that she wouldn't hurt you, but it didn't occur to me. There's probably a luthier in town. I mean, I'm not going to pay for it, but you have money. And then she just walks away again, and then seems to remember herself and like gestures for Alberth to walk in front. And then, yeah, you guys proceed.
Standing up for me back there. I mean, for a second.
Hey, you got it. No sense of your irony or passive aggressiveness. She just storms ahead. No one else bothers you at all for the rest of your walk up to the main keep of Earnhold. The keep is really impressive, which can mean one of a couple things. It could mean that this noble house has resources more than you would be inclined, like more than you would realize they have from their humble barony, or it could mean that despite having such a small barony, it was so important that they put on like a good face, like a good showing, that they ended up overtaxing or overworking the residents of the area very close to the capital in order to build a keep very impressive at the cost of the sort of like living conditions of the people around them. And judging from the poverty in the area around the keep, you would guess it's the latter. That this place has been overburdened and overtaxed by apparently a lord, a baron, who the crown didn't really want to give like a real barony anyways. All in all, a pretty bad impression as you walk up these steps, but the first room you enter is this enormous grand hall. It's got the high ceilings that you only really see in like a mega church, like something built to be impractically large, and usually to be a symbol of something like larger than. In most cases, that's religion, that's like a god, or a mountain, weirdly. Actually, the Church of the Mountain doesn't really have, like, mega churches. They tend to worship in, like, caves. Like, they burrow out areas. They worship underground. But regardless, you enter this enormous great hall, or grand hall, with like, stained glass windows. It's very Gothic. Huge ceiling. And there is a massive throne. Alberth, you've been to the capital, and this throne looks like it was built on the same specifications. Like, this Baron wanted to feel like they were sitting on a throne of equal importance as the kingdom, even though one look around, that's just not true. A very old man is, like, leaning over, chin on his closed fist, as he speaks to the two people to his right and left. A ruler or a lord's right hand and left hand attendants have a sort of symbolic significance in this kingdom. Namely, your right hand attendant, or your counselor, is supposed to do your most righteous work. A right hand attendant, a counselor, is characterized by their loyalty and by their truthfulness and by their regard by the community at large. They're the face of your party. If you are a king or a lord or a baron or a duke or a viscount or any of the titles that nobility make up to feel good about themselves, your right hand person is strong, loyal, usually in charge of enforcement, and he's supposed to be very renowned. Your left-hand attendant, or your vizier, is supposed to take care of everything under the table. Everything secret goes through the left hand. Everything mischievous or clever, you sort of got your Gryffindor right hand and your Slytherin left hand, if I can use another fantasy reference to round out the system that I'm explaining to you. And it's commonly accepted that a ruler needs both to do well. Paradoxically, since the right hand is usually in charge of enforcement, left hands tend to be more popular by the end of their service, because you pick someone who's really popular to be your right hand, and they end up not being very popular because they're a cop. So you enter this guy's saying something. He has a lot to say to his right hand woman, who like nods. She's wearing really polished armor, and hanging from like a chink in her breastplate, like between two of those scales, is where you normally hang ribbons with crests on them to show status or allegiance. It's sort of like where you keep medals on, like if you're a decorated war hero. But hanging from this is a simple white ribbon with a plain symbol that you've seen before on Yasika's chestplate. So yeah, you guys walk in, and yeah, this Baron, who you guys know probably by reputation because you've been in this place for a while, and Vizier Khan probably told you who you're speaking to. It's Baron Tieflayen. The Tief in Tieflayen means under or lower, just like the ancient dwarven word meant deep, so Tiefstahl, deep steel. Tieflayen means a sub-house of Lehen. Kind of like the Karstarks in Game of Thrones, how they're like an offshoot of the Stark family. It's a prefix that denotes that they are subservient to another house. So the fact that this person ended up Baron, but is like of a sub-house, probably explains why they have a really crappy barony, and why they maybe feel like they have a lot to prove. But Baron Tieflayen is sitting back, and a servant brings him a cup of very red wine as you guys approach him, and he takes a long and deliberate gulp before addressing you, sets it down and looks down at you. At this point, Vizier Kama has stepped back in front to make it clear that she's in charge, so he's not expecting Alberth to speak, but he leans forward and temples his hands, and he says, "Right, what is it you want?" And Vizier Kama kind of furrows her brow. She says, "My lord, I would like to discuss some kingdom news with you in private." He says, "Kingdom news? I thought you were a trader." "We heard from the scouts, from the patrols, that someone flashed a writ of trade traveling through the barony. What brings you here?" And she looks around. The Baron and his right and left hand people are not the only people in the room. There are 2 guards at each of 4 entrances, so there are 8 sort of baronic guards. Baronic, I think, is like royal, but for a baron, doesn't matter. So there are 8 guards in the Baron's guard, or like sort of royal guard, and there are maybe a dozen scribes in attendance pews that are lined up on the side. All like they all seem to be taking notes of like what's happening. Usually 1 scribe is fine for that, so maybe there's just a bunch of them doing their scrivery, like their scribe work in here. Unclear. But Vizier Kama looks around and kind of like whispers to you guys, like, I don't think we should have this many ears in the room when we say that we're on royal business. We don't want to get tracked down again. So let's, yeah. And she clears her throat and she says, "My lord, we are traders, but we don't have anything to sell here. We're passing through. We need to get to the capital, and I could really use a private conversation with you." And he leans forward with that sneer still on his face. He says, "Private conversation? What? So you can let a knife do your talking?" And Vizier Kama seems taken aback by this. She says, "My lord, that doesn't seem necessary." And he cuts her off. And he says, "Master Trader came through a couple days ago, selling citrus fruits. He was taking citrus fruits out east to the Red Reach, to the border. He flashed a writ of trade too. The same writ of trade." And Vizier Kama's eyes darken, and he says, "Now tell me again, thief, why are you in my barony?" And her eyes grow dark, and she says, "I can't tell you." And he grows incredulous at this. He says, "Listen here, thief bitch. You need to stop being honest with me right now. My guards outnumber yours. I don't know if you've learned to count yet." She kind of like takes a moment, looks at you guys like, "Do you guys have anything to add?" She's clearly trying to figure a way out of this.
I just cast compel indiscretion on him, just see what happens.
Yeah. He leans back, furrows his brow, and for a moment you think, is he aware that something's happening to him? A psychic ward is a way that a mage can prevent compulsion effects. But even the average person, when exposed to that kind of undue influence enough, can exercise psychic protections. Many, like, really high-ranking, like, nobility know how to do this, but it's mostly, like, royalty and their close attendants, because it's really important that a king isn't, like, compelled to panic or compelled to be more kind to, like, a criminal than he should be, or that kind of undue influence is why royalty gets trained in this. But you'd be surprised if someone this low-ranking. He furrows his brow, shakes his head like he's trying to shake something off, and then something in his mind that hasn't really been trained enough fully gives over, and you feel the spell take hold of him. And he leans forward, and he says, "Listen, an example needs to be made. Plenty of thieves come to this shithole of a barony." And he kind of furrows his brow like he's hearing what he's saying and doesn't like it. And he says, "Big thief like you, stealing a writ of trade from a tradesmaster, a member of the mercantile guild. I could really use your head on a spike. And he fully, like, shakes. He's trying to get something out of his head, and his right hand, like, his counselor looks at him like, stop talking, even if you need to do that. Don't say it. And all the scribes, like, the pens kind of stop, and they all look at each other, and one person's like, oh yeah, I'm worried too, and it's like writing really frantically, like trying to get it all on paper. And the Baron shoots that scribe specifically a look, and they just fully drop their quills, spill the ink, and just like leave the room. Like they just speed walk out of the room, and the two guards like not sure whether to stop them, but they don't, and the scribe leaves, and there's just like this really elongated pause as the Baron seems to be like clenching his teeth, like struggling not to talk. And he says, you stole the writ of trade, right? and Vizier
speak up, and I'll say, it's all right, Vizier. No need to keep up the facade anymore. There's no need for it to come to that, Baron. I bought the writ of trade. I'm the son of a duke from... Why do I want to say Ventus? That's from another book. What's the name of my country?
Venel, yes.
Venel. I'm a son of a duke from Venel. I was here abroad studying, and I'm returning home, but I needed a caravan to get me there safely. It's, of course, not safe to travel if people know that you're nobility, especially in a foreign land such as this. Surely you understand the need for a guise such as this.
And he turns his sneer to you, and it does soften a little bit. That's a really great character idea, by the way. That's a good dialogue. He turns a sneer to you and says, "Well, I suppose that it's still illegal to buy a writ of trade."
Must be a difference of customs between our two nations. My apologies.
It's a weak bluff because the guild, the Merchants Guild, is actually across all 6 kingdoms. But he nods like it's a very reasonable excuse. He says, "I suppose it must be. Maybe no one's heads have to come out of the Grand Hall on spikes. Plus, I respect you more because you're not a woman." He fully like slams. He slams his head down, like trying to stop himself, and he like pours wine in his throat and like chokes on it a little bit. And his right hand, who is a woman and clearly like an inheritor, is what she appears to be, like fully puts her face in her hands and like gestures people over that she's clearly like gonna have to start doing damage control. Like she gestures the guards over and starts like whispering some stuff to them, and he just goes, and he slams the glass of wine off of his throne, and he leans back in very threateningly and turns to Vizier Kama, and he seems to struggle for words to say, and Vizier Kama like takes a couple steps over, grabs Merigold on the sleeve. She says, "That was quick thinking. Did you have to call me Vizier?"
Oops.
The Baron seems not to have noticed this very slight indiscretion. And he leans forward and says, "Right. Well, if you are... You're just merchants, then, not thieves. You're illegal merchants, so we'll have to seize your stock, but I suppose you'll be free to go." And Vizier Kama... she furrows her brow because those are unacceptable terms. She needs to get the Golden Gale, the rare herb, back to the capital. And she says, "What, we don't get to keep anything?" And he turns his sneer back towards her, and it comes back in a way that, in a way more carefully disguised than before, but he's fully like flinching. He's like developed a facial tic, and you can tell that if pushed further, he might just have you killed. And because he doesn't actually know that you're like serving royalty, he probably thinks he could get away with it. Because if you weren't with a vizier, even though you're like royal, your nobility from another kingdom, he might be able to, with like podunk baronies like this, the power is so centralized and he has so much control over everyone's lives that sometimes word just doesn't get out to the throne. And you can see him like trying to control himself, and his left hand, like by which I mean his vizier, like his left hand advisor, kind of like coughs and flexes his hand in a weird way, but you can see the Baron like calm down and sit back in his seat. You think that the left hand of the Baron, the left hand of Baron Tieflayen might be a caster, which would mean he's got casters on his right hand and his left. Much like the Queen. I mean, much like the King. I'm sorry. The Queen's left hand is Vizier Kama. The King's right hand was actually Archduke Visica, who died and had the whole deathbed prophecy, and the King's left hand is that Master of Wishes and Whispers. Yeah. That's probably all you guys know about them. But the Baron finally settles back down and says, right, yes, seizure of all your wares is... And he shakes a fog from his head, but he just looks tired now, more than angry. He says, it's necessary, because you're not supposed to carry it across. We'll be fined by the guild for this, and even the crown couldn't get in the way of that. We need to seize your wares so that we can turn them back over, and especially the writ of trade, we need to return that. Vizier Kama just needs to take one last shot at it, and she says, look, now that you know we're not... I get that when you thought we were thieves, that you had to... And he says, don't talk down to me, just say what you want. And she says, fine, we have something that we can't turn over. Can I speak to you in private? There are elements of this situation that you don't understand. And he thinks about it and narrows his eyes, and he says, no. And he doesn't give a reason. He just doesn't comply. And Vizier Kama, like, now she kind of has a facial twitch, that her mouth is turning up at the outside, and she says, my lord, and he slams the throne once again and says, Baron, call me by my title. And the Vizier, like, flexes his hand like he's going to cast something again, and the Baron shoots him a look, and the Vizier, like, goes completely white, and then goes out the same door that the scribe went out. And he says, say your piece here, or not at all. And Vizier Kama, knowing that she doesn't just need to keep the Golden Gale, she needs reinforcements from this guy, and the only way to do that is to strong-arm him. She grits her teeth, reaches into her bag, and pulls out a small canister that Merigold recognizes fast enough to shield his eyes. But Vizier Kama unscrews the top of this, and it shoots out flames. It is a mage's flare. She is not attacking with it. However, all the lights... All the, like, torches, and in fact the light coming through the stained glass is, like, dampened. And this flare shoots out like a projected light onto the distant ceiling. And it's, I mean, it's a projection, so it gets bigger the further it goes, but it's incredibly bright. So it shows up really crisply on the roof of this place and shines all the way up there. The crest's so big, it practically encompasses the entire ceiling. It is the blazing crest of Archduke Visica, a symbol that she has the king's favor and is in fact in his employ. And the Baron just puts his head in his hands because he knows what this means. And eventually, it takes like 30 full seconds, and she's just holding this. It seems to be like shooting something physical, like a physical blazing light out of it. And she seems like tired by the time it goes out, and she kind of like shakes it, and it like lets out a few sparks, like a dying Roman candle. She says, caves, I hate using that, and just discards it to the side. And she says, I'm Vizier Kama, left hand of the Queen. I need to commandeer half of your Baronic Guard, as I am entitled by the Crown's law. And he shakes his head, quakes with rage, and eventually takes his hand from his face, showing like a sickly smile. And he says, Crown's law. Crown's law. Fine. Then you know as well as I, by that same law, I have the right to demand a boon of you in return. She goes, yeah. What errand do you want me to run so that we can get out of this hellhole? and he looks like he's about to say, he looks like he's about to say where she can stick her glaive. There's surely some red hot quip about the favor that she can do, and it's only going to be 2 words. It looks like he's going to be very satisfied with it, but his right-hand advisor, his counselor, grabs him by the wrist, and he turns towards her, and now he looks afraid, like he goes a little bit white, and she leans forward and whispers something in his ear, and he like looks down and nods and shakes himself, and he says, there's a chimera bothering the peasants in the North Hills. Go have your cronies take care of it. You can take half my men and get out. And she says, as you wish, my lord. And she gestures for you guys to follow her as she walks out of the Grand Hall.
I see.
As we walk out, I'm going to say, and send some lute strings with one of those men, please.
He looks like confused by this, if nothing else, as you guys walk out of the Grand Hall. Back at the caravan, Keath has continued to notice that dark figure, and it's gotten closer and closer. And you swear one of the times you had Rez Kalen look out, and you could still clock it. Like, you could still see it, and Rez Kalen said that he couldn't see anything. You're concerned that this is the next symptom, a very quick onset. This could mean that things are ending faster than you thought.
Can I try, like, scribing them, like drawing it, if I can, like the different phases, or if I notice anything different between events?
Yes, yeah. And they might only be...
I'm sure I'm no sketch artist.
Yeah. Yeah, you sketch out. It's they're not close enough that you can see like a face or like a lot of distinguishing features, but they do keep popping up in different areas. And it seems like they're getting closer to you. And altogether, it occurs to you when you sketch it out, you look at the pattern of where they were appearing. You first try to sketch out like the details of their face that you can see, but it's such a dark image. You're pretty sure it's
a fool's errand.
You're pretty sure it's kind of short. It might be like average height for a woman, but a little short for a man. And while you're sketching, you see again as close as they've ever been, and you watch them. You seem to lock eyes with them as they walk and slip behind like a tree in the tree line, and seem to disappear. And something occurs to you, and instead of drawing the facial features or the shape, you flip it open and you sketch. They were this far out, I would say, when I was looking in this direction, this far out in this direction. And as you plot the different places they were, you recognize a pattern of tightening loops, like a predator closing in on its prey. And then the party gets back to the caravan.
Oh, thank God. Is Angel Boy around?
Abakashad is with you, yeah.
I'm gonna tell him this. I'm gonna like pull him aside, have like a small talk with him, let him know kind of what I've been seeing, and ask if he's able to either like watch over me or anything along those lines.
Keath, I gotta tell you, my eyesight is really good. Thank goodness you said something, man. I thought it was in my imagination, because they were still far enough away that I was like, I mean, I see all sorts of people from up here, because I got that angel eyesight, you know? But I wasn't sure how close they were supposed to be before I brought it up. It's definitely not in your head, and that's definitely a person. And now that we've ended that tension... I think that's going to be it for today. We're getting close to our time limit, so... thank you guys for coming. Great scenes. I think this means there will be 2 more weeks of this campaign. Next week and a week after that will be our finale. You guys are hunting a chimera. You're avoiding hunters. There's a mysterious figure that's almost certainly not in Keith's imagination, closing in ever-tightening spirals. You pissed off a baron. The baron pissed off you. There are several scribes and viziers who are in fear for their lives. And, yeah.
Merigold's a genius. Just like...
That was very good.
Out of this. That was awesome.
Yes.
Right on. Anything to say to our audience before we stop streaming and recording?
Bye.
Right on.
Thank you so much.
Sassy, Miles. We love you. All right, come see us next week, 7 p.m. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Time.